Annenberg Media.
With additional support from Equicor Equitable HCA Corporation, the Good Listening Employee Benefits Company.
We do not all start life on an even playing field. But the rules are that we all play it by the rules of honesty and ethics.
Before I took that case, I had to agree that I would do anything ethical to defend that man.
So I'm going to just do the best I can. Is it imperfect? You bet. Is it awful? Well, maybe so.
Isn't there a point in a civilized society where one man has to be willing to step outside the system and say, no, I cannot do this because it's wrong?
I think we're at that point, which is nice in the sense, ethically, where we don't have the rules to protect us. We have to agonize with ourselves and our conscience.
In 1776, there was a smallpox epidemic in England and thousands died. Dr. Edward Jenner speculated that by exposing patients to cowpox, a mild form of the disease, he could protect them from the fatal disease smallpox. To prove his theory, Dr. Jenner, a real pioneer, inoculated a healthy 8-year-old boy, one James Phipps, with cowpox. And 6 weeks later, Jenner exposed Phipps to the deadly smallpox virus. The boy remained healthy. Jenner had indeed discovered the vaccine for smallpox, and in the 200 years since, millions and millions of lives have been saved. Of course, first Jenner had to make a young boy serve as guinea pig for the rest of us. That 8-year-old boy might well have died in the uncontrolled experiment if Jenner had guessed wrong. The question is it ethical to risk the life of one patient today in order to save other patients tomorrow? Modern medical researchers have tried to set up guidelines to help answer that question. Sometimes the guidelines fall short. Researchers use some technical terms which you and I need to know. A protocol is simply the plan for an experiment. A placebo, a word you're going to hear over and over again, is in effect a sugar pill, a harmless substance sometimes given to some patients in an experiment instead of the real medicine that is being tested. That way, researchers can tell better whether or not the experimental medicine is working. This program could be about the quest to cure any disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. Our metaphor is AIDS. The moderator is Lewis Caden.
Dr. Coop, I am one of your patients. My name is Bill Parker. A short time ago, I noticed a little red mark on my thigh, and I came to you. You had it tested, and you tell me it's Kaposi sarcoma. We began to talk about my other symptoms, my lifestyle, how I was feeling, and you suggested that a test for AIDS might be a good idea. It didn't surprise me, but they were positive. I have AIDS. It turns out that this is a new and powerful strain of AIDS, not responding, as far as anyone knows, to any treatment, AZT or anything else. Am I going to die?
Bill, as far as we know, you're going to die. Everybody's going to die, but I think you're going to die sooner than some because you do have this new HIV-4, about which we don't know as much as we do the others. It is very virulent, and we don't have a thing to do for you except to treat you symptomatically. We'll do the best we can.
Suppose it turns out that Dr. DeVita over at the National Disease Institute has just started a test of a new therapy, a new drug. It's called HOPE, HOPE. You going to call up Dr. DeVita?
I sure am. I've got a patient in the office. He's got Kaposi's, no question about it. He's antibody positive for HIV-4. I know you're trying this HOPE. Do you think he fits the protocol?
We would agree to see the patient, and if the patient fit the protocol and wanted to join, we would allow the patient to come on and study.
Dr. DeVita, you agree to see me? What do you want to know?
Well, I have to explain what the experiment's all about. For example, did you understand that we really are, you may be the first or the second patient that's going on this drug. Do you really understand that we really don't know the effect of this drug?
Let's assume that you've picked most of the subjects, and the question is, what do you need to know about me at this point? You only have a spot or two left.
I really only need to know about your physical illness in terms of your eligibility for the protocol.
I fit the protocol.
And your understanding of the protocol. I don't need to get any more involved in that.
Well, now let's suppose that Paul Duncan, who's eager to get into this test, Mr. Califano, was in fact a messenger in your office in the government years ago. You liked him then, you happened to know him, but he comes to see you now, and he says, my luck's really gone bad. Out of work, out of money, has AIDS, trying to get into this test. Will you help me?
Sure.
Will you call up Dr. DeVita for me?
Call up probably Dr. DeVita because I happen to know him, but I'd call up the secretary of HHS if I knew him. I'd call up somebody.
You used to be the secretary.
I received many calls from senators or congressmen to get people into one or another program.
And would you call the program director?
I would call the program director.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd say, Dr. DeVita, Senator X has called me, and he's got a nephew that's got AIDS, got a problem, and he would like to get his nephew into your protocol, into your program.
What's your reaction?
Fine. We don't discriminate against people with influence, and
well,
if there is an eligible patient, we'll take the patient.
But even though your program is full, I'd like you to make an extra slot for him.
Well, the end point of these protocols is really not that sharp, so we might take an extra case under those circumstances.
You might take an extra case if Secretary Califano called? Does it matter to you that the Secretary is calling?
It would depend on whether Hope had another drug, Son of Hope, that we were studying at the same time. In other words, we have another protocol. If we didn't have a protocol, we might go longer on this particular protocol. So we could be flexible, but we normally would not take a case not eligible for a protocol, even if Joe Califano called.
It's the nephew of the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee.
Yeah.
That might matter.
The secretary, if Mr. Califano was still Secretary Califano, would make a difference.
It'd make a difference.
Yes.
Now,
it doesn't happen that often, but it would make a difference.
Mr. Califano, no question you'd make that call for Paul.
No question, but that I'd make that call.
Justice Scalia, did you make the call for a nephew?
Sure.
No question.
No question.
Ms. Goodman, suppose you're the editor of the local paper. Would you make the call?
I probably would, uncomfortably.
Why uncomfortably?
Because you know that you're jumping ahead, or you're trying to use your own influence. You know there might be some chits that are out when you do that. But the primacy of the sick nephew would take precedence, even though I'd be uncomfortable with it.
And the degree of comfort might depend on the nature of the relationship?
It would depend on the, it would, in how you feel about it, it would. If, moving along the continuum from a reader to a nephew, I'd be much more, I'd make the call for the nephew, and I wouldn't make the call for the reader directly, although I might assign one of my reporters to do a story about this person in the community who needs to be a part of the protocol.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Oldham, if you were the director of the test, matter who calls you?
I don't think there's any question that at the National Disease Center Institute that political influence plays a role in entering patients on protocol. What's the frequency? I don't know. What are the number of calls? When I was there, they were frequent. They're real, they have influence, and they're part of the political system of research in this country.
Justice Scalia?
I think a qualification has to be made. Maybe my response to your question earlier was too quick and too unqualified.
I'm assuming that, that the Institute does not have a case currently pending before my court. I don't think I would even call on behalf of my nephew if there were any possibility of an appearance that the quid pro quo for the Institute taking my nephew is my being more favorably disposed to the disposition of that case. I figure I can get through to the director simply because he may have heard of my name or heard of the Supreme Court with no implication that you do this for me and I'll do something for you. Those are the conditions on which I call.
Suppose instead of being a justice, you're the senator and chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Now, there's no question you've got a lot of control over that budget.
I suppose I would. I don't think there are the same barriers between
senator and justice.
Well, politics is to some extent the trading off of favors. Justice isn't.
Mr. Califano?
It's more than politics. I mean, we shouldn't spit out the word politics as though it's a dirty word. I mean, part of living day to day in this world and moving forward on a lot of things is when somebody like the chairman of the Appropriations Committee calls to take care of him if it's not an illegitimate
or
request.
The senator or the congressman. Father Hare, is it ethical? Well, my chances of getting in may depend on whether I'm Mr. Califano's nephew or Justice Scalia's neighbor.
I think the commitment of the legal system and the procedural system to fairness ought to be the presumption. In a sense, I'd be like Miss Goodman. I'd be somewhat hesitant about the call, but I think I'd make the call.
But you think you'd make it?
I'd make the call for a relative. Second point, though. After I've made the call, then the next step comes. After I've made the call, then the question becomes, how much leverage do you want to exercise beyond the call? I think that can get a little bit stickier. I think the chairman of the Appropriations Committee can make the call. The answer comes back, the program's filled, we just don't have anything, we can't do anything. He says it damn well better be opened. That's a different kind of leverage.
Dr. DeVita, let's go back to the interview with Bill Parker. If I go into this test with you, are you going to try to make me better?
Yes, Bill, I am. I think that we wouldn't have taken this drug as far as we have if we didn't have some expectation that it would be helpful, and we'll try to help you.
Well, you've just explained to me a minute before that out of these 200 people, 100 are going to get hope, and 100 are going to get a placebo. Nothing. Now, I'm not quite sure I understand. If I take that chance, how's that going to help me?
I assume I'm confined to the constraints of that particular protocol that you just gave me.
That's right.
Well, the only way to defend that is that we don't have any understanding of whether or not this drug will do more good than harm. It's a randomized trial. I have to explain to him that he's going to be randomized and that we have expectations it might be useful, but it might not be useful, and we have no standard therapy, and placebo is a way of keeping it undercover as to whether or not you're getting the active drug or the inactive drug. And so I have some doubts myself about doing a randomized trial in this kind of situation.
Could you say you're going to try to help me?
I would say that this is the best we can do, because if HOPE works, we can then use that information to treat the people on the other arm.
I might be dead.
It's possible, yes.
Dr. Chalmers, is that the best that can be done for me?
I think it has to be made clear to the patient that there's a large number of drugs introduced every year for serious disease like this, and very few of them survive. And the reason they don't survive is they make the patients worse or they're ineffective. So I would say that the patient getting the placebo is much more likely to be the lucky one. Even though...
We have a chance to object to this.
Dr. DeVita?
I mean, in the hypothetical situation that was established, it wouldn't probably occur in the sense that we would not do a randomized controlled trial as the first step for HOPE.
So that's where I think you're wrong.
Well, I think you're wrong, and I think that the fact is that most patients are not harmed. Many are not benefited by the new drug, or at least it turns out to be superseded by another drug. So I think that's not quite an accurate statement, but there is an ethical consideration as to whether you should randomize to a brand new drug. I personally don't think we should.
My concern is, Dr. Young, is if this is a random 50% placebo, 50% HOPE test, what's the ethics of that situation?
I think the nail that Tom hit right on the head was when we look at all the drugs coming through, the clinical investigation, 73% fail. over 1/3 fail because they're not safe. So what I would tell you, Bill, is this. I'm going to be your advocate, I'm going to be your physician when you come into this trial. During the time that we're in, and I don't know whether you're going to be on placebo or whether you're going to be on the drug itself, but you're going to get the best medical care that we can.
Justice Scalia?
I just can't believe this. What percentage of placebos fail? I mean, if 75% of everything else fails and 100% of placebos fail, I want the 75. I think it's absolutely unreal to tell this patient, you know, we don't really know this thing is very. Of course, you suspect it's more useful than aspirin, or you'd be giving everybody aspirin and placebos. It just is not real to say you won't have a better chance if you get this new drug rather than the placebo.
Dr. Young?
Justice, I think the important thing that Bill must understand is that because over 1/3 of these are safety problems, those people are likely to have an acceleration of death. And tomorrow, there might be son of hope, and that acceleration of death could really be a major problem.
Professor Cabron?
Well, I'm happy to see the physicians trying to insist a bill that there is a reason for doing the placebo. It's in his benefit, but I haven't heard anybody really acknowledge the conflict of roles that does exist here. It isn't just to be better for Bill that we're using the placebo. It's to gain knowledge, and the researcher is wearing both of those hats, and I haven't really heard that acknowledged here yet.
Dr. Rillman?
Dr. DeVita pointed out something very important. A randomized controlled trial with placebo as one arm is not justified for a deadly disease if you're sure that you could tell the effect of a new drug without a placebo. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you had a disease that was inevitably and rapidly fatal, and you knew that any change in that rapidly fatal course would be an effect of the drug, Dr. DeVita and his colleagues probably would not suggest a randomized.
They should give everybody this
Yeah,
drug.
because it'd be very clear. If before 95% or 100% died in a month or 2 months, and now without a placebo, 20% died or 40% died, it would be very clear, and I don't think it would be ethical if they felt they could find the answer to their question without a placebo.
Well,
But
suppose instead of the placebo, they have designed the protocol to use AZT, to use an existing drug that has some benefit, not clear how much, on this strain.
Yeah.
Half the people get AZT, half the people get hope.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
is the conflict changed?
If there's reason to believe that AZT would be helpful against HIV-4.
Some help. It's not clear how much.
Yeah.
Why is that different than the placebo?
Well, because placebo doesn't kill you, and the new drug might. That's a big difference. And we haven't tested this new drug in humans yet. And for all we know, their livers may all turn yellow and they may die in 2 weeks, or they may go blind, or their kidneys may stop functioning. Something you can't tell from a test tube, and you can't always tell from animal experimentation. It's a real risk.
Dr. DeVita, let's go back to our interview. I take it I have to agree to go into this program.
Yes.
We have this conversation. You tell me about all the choices and the risks. And as you tell me that, I'm jumping up and down. This is the only hope for me. And I keep interrupting you and asking you, where do I sign? What do I have to do?
Well, I have to keep reminding you that you may not get hope, that you're going to get the placebo.
I understand that, but if I don't go in, I can't get hope.
Right,
I just want to sign. I just want to sign.
Give it to you and sign. So here's the informed consent form, which explains in page after page after page.
I know there are a lot of forms. Just tell me where to put my name.
Sign it right here.
No problem. Professor Capron?
Well, I think we have an illustration of the conflict of the meaning on the word autonomy. The whole idea of signing the consent form is making the choice, but we have some hope that the protocol expert here is going to take time to say, I think we need some psychological understanding of what's going on here, some absorbing of the information. Let's talk further. We're not going to start you today in any case. I want to give you some information to go home with. I want to talk to you again tomorrow. This is the kind of thing where you may be making a decision that you don't fully understand yet.
And the test director is going to tell me that?
Well, I would
go home, calm down.
I would hope he would. He seemed rather eager to give you the form to sign. But I hope that wasn't part of that conflict of wanting to get his research.
What's the problem?
Well, the problem is this notion, we talk about choice, autonomy. That's why we have
informed consent.
Informed consent, and that's why we have this. But sometimes a person is going to not be in a position to make that kind of choice. And in ordinary life, we would say to a friend, wait a second, I think you need to hear this information.
Justice Scalia, can somebody in Bill's state make a consent that reasonable people would view as informed?
I think so. If you're dying and this is your last chance, it is inevitable that you'll take that last chance.
That's not true.
I don't know why that makes it an uninformed choice. If all you're saying is that because you're dying and because it seems to you that there are no other options, you're bound, of course, to sign the form.
The question is,
that just means it's a good choice.
Should the system require more of a pause?
Of course, there should be, and I'm sure for serious decisions such as this, there must be adequate deliberation. But the mere fact that the individual is under a lot of pressure to make the choice one way or another by the circumstances, it doesn't seem to me to establish that the choice is coerced, unfair, or uninformed.
Mr. Califano?
I mean, I think there's a desperation when you're facing death that closely, and I think I would say with Dr. Ellman, I think somebody besides the individual patient, no matter how intelligent he is, and I think it is a situation in which the primary care physician should be a big part of it, because I think it's impossible for Dr. DeVita, as spectacular as he is, not to have his main focus on that protocol and on his obligation running the National Disease Institute to find a cure for this disease. And in a sense, the individual patient is sacrificing himself.
Would Dr. DeVita tell him that you can't tell the effects immediately, even if he was getting the placebo?
Dr. DeVita?
I wouldn't know.
Oh, you wouldn't know yourself?
I wouldn't know.
What about
I might not know. I might know. But
Dr. DeVita, let's assume you don't know. That's called a double-blind experiment?
Right.
My problem is, Dr. Young, I keep looking for somebody to have my interest at heart, to be my champion. And now I'm told that everybody's blind. Is it ethical to have a test in which the researcher doesn't know what I'm getting?
I think it's highly ethical for the researcher not to know, because in that sense, then the researcher is not going to be unduly influenced and will be objective, because sometimes as the researcher works with you, unless he can fully look at you very carefully, he might miss some things and not have the results really observed correctly.
Professor Capron, is there any ethical problem here in Dr. DeVita not knowing what I'm getting and this double-blind?
It underlines the fact that there are these two roles, because the major advantage when one gets to double blinding is the scientific results. And the FDA commissioner is going to want to see results which are not merely the projection of the researcher saying, I know this person's getting nothing, I know this person's getting my drug, and I see all these good results with the person getting my drug.
So you can't have good science without this part of the protocol?
No, there are other ways to design protocols, but that is the justification, really, for this design.
And who's looking after Bill's interest?
What we're still saying is, until that point, we want to be conducting science, which is fine. Everybody benefits from that. But that's why I wanted Bill to really understand that part of what he's being asked to do is to give something to society, to give to future patients the possibility that they'll have an effective treatment. And if he signs real quickly and doesn't know that, he may end up very unhappy when he discovers that there are constraints.
Let's see if there's another approach for Bill Parker. Dr. Oldham, you've left the National Disease Institute some time ago, and you've moved to Tennessee, and you've started a company called BioClinics. One of the therapies you've recently developed is a therapy for Kaposi sarcoma. Bill Parker hears about that and comes to see you. He tells you that, you know, doctor, I'm in Dr. DeVita's study over at the National Disease Institute. I'd like to try your program. Can I do it?
You can, but you'll have to stop hope, because I don't know what might happen if we put my treatment together with the National Disease Institute treatment. The two might interact in an unfavorable way.
But if I'm willing to drop out of this program, you'll take me on?
Yes.
Dr. DeVita, suppose I come back to you after this visit with Dr. Oldham, and I tell you, you know, I went to Tennessee, I saw Dr. Oldham. Can I drop out? Can I go see him?
Yes, you can drop out. Again, the protocol is not over yet. The study's not over. It's perhaps a premature conclusion, but if you feel that way, you can drop out.
You going to try to talk me out of it?
Only to the extent that I think it's unfortunate to leave a protocol before the study's finished, because there have been many examples where the information was either useful later on in the study, or we broke the arm, you are not on HOPE, and we put you on HOPE later, and you might benefit from it.
Dr. Oldham, I come back to you. What do I need to know?
Well, there's several things you have to know. One is you have to be off your previous treatment for a particular period of time, so I know that it's not having an effect on your tumor, your body. You're going to have to understand that we work not as a government-funded institution. We happen to be out in the private sector. And
what does that mean?
Well, it means that we don't have a grant or public money to do this research. It may be necessary for you or your insurance company to participate in this research project.
You're telling me I'm going to have to pay you for this?
I'm telling you, very much like treatment you might get at your local university, you may have to have insurance or direct pay capability to receive this new treatment, yes.
How much is it going to cost me?
Well, it varies. The particular treatment I'm thinking of is a combination of interleukin-2 and tumor necrosis factor, and the cost on that relates only to some tests we have to do in the laboratory while you receive that. Will cost you about $4,000.
Suppose this therapy that you've developed for Kaposi sarcoma is similar to the therapy you've been using of monoclonal antibodies.
That'd be much more expensive. It might cost as much as $30,000, $35,000.
$35,000. Dr. Coop, should I go into this program?
I think before you go into the program, you want to be sure that when you get down it a way, you're not going to have the same discouragement you had with Dr. DeVita. I think you have to make up your mind that things don't always work out the way you'd like, and you just can't go jumping from protocol to protocol.
Dr. Peterson, if you were my family doctor, could you evaluate whether Dr. Oldham's program might be something for me?
Bill, you've got a disease that will almost certainly kill you in the next months. There's no medicine now known to experimental science or to any investigative company that's likely to save your life. Now,
I know that, but Dr. Oldham tells me that he's going to be devoted to trying to help me.
That's right.
He's going to give me this.
And if I were you, I would seriously consider that because it represents real hope. But don't do it in the context, in a naive context. Do it in the context of saying, I'm dying, and I'm dying in the immediate future. Now, if it's useful for me to make a contribution to medical science by joining a protocol at NDI or going with a private company in their protocol, I should do that and derive some satisfaction from that. But not very much hope, H-O-P-E, without the periods in between. I should not have much expectation.
How can you tell?
But I wouldn't take all your money out of the bank. I wouldn't ask all your brothers and sisters in California to raise money. I wouldn't call on the governor to have a fundraising drive to get you money for this, because the chances of this helping you in the near future in your lifetime are very small.
Look, if I don't try it, I'm dead.
And you want to live your death with as much dignity as you want to live your life. And for that reason, you should not bankrupt your family and do a whole lot of strange things for a small point. Well, but I happen to know this man's company, and I know that they're doing very exciting work. And we can work this out, and you can do that for $4,000 or $5,000, and that would be worth doing.
Dr. Oldham?
I think you should understand what you've been told by other physicians, that this is unproven treatment. This is research, just like HOPE at the National Disease Institute. This is unproven treatment. And you have to make the decision for yourself what you want to do, but these expenses are real. And you need to discuss this with your brother, your church, your support groups, just like if you were to have a heart transplant, for example, and you needed to get your community involved to raise the money. You need to discuss this seriously and decide if you want to move forward.
Dr. Relman? You've heard about Dr. Oldham's therapy.
Yes, I have.
You're my family doctor. Should I do it?
I'd be very concerned about it, Bill. I'd like to know a lot more than I know now before I could recommend that you do this.
Well, how can you find out?
Well, one of the things I would like to know, for example, is whether Dr. Oldham is following a protocol which is going to answer the question whether his treatment is effective or not. As far as I know, I read the medical literature very carefully, Bill, and I haven't seen any reports anywhere indicating that what Dr. Oldham says he's going to do for you helps anybody. We're talking about the ethics of responsible research. When you use a new drug or a new treatment, the safety of which, as well as the effectiveness is not known, the ethical justification for doing it is that it's going to be administered in a way that you're going to find out. It's going to tell you the answer as quickly and as safely as possible, whether it's any good, whether it's dangerous or not. And then if there's no other treatment for a bad disease, it's perfectly justifiable to do it. So I would like to know from Dr. Oldham whether he is going to follow the same rigorous, controlled, appropriately controlled protocol, which will be open to public scrutiny as any other protocol would, being followed at the NDI, which would, within a finite period of time, give us an answer.
Dr. Oldham?
Well, the last studies we did were in other diseases, Bill, and we did publish them. We published them in a small journal in Boston, the New England Medical Journal, and we felt like those results were well received.
But not about this treatment, Dr. Oldham.
This is a new treatment. This is a new treatment. We're going to proceed along the same lines. This is not a randomized trial. I don't believe in this kind of serious disease you should receive a placebo. I believe you should receive whatever I believe to be the best shot for you as a potential treatment. And that's what we'll give you. It's called an open study. And if after treating 20 or 30 patients, we see the effects of those treatments and shrinkage of your capacities, then we'll report that in the medical literature and decide how to go from there.
Dr. Oldham?
Dr. Oldham, how many patients have you treated with this new therapy so far, and how many reports on this have you published in the medical literature so I can tell whether it looks promising or not?
I wish I could help you, doctor, but I can't because this patient happens to be the first patient that's come to me, and this new treatment I just developed last week.
Well,
do we make any distinctions here? I mean, nobody has yet made a distinction between a for-profit research, which is charging the patient a considerable amount of money in order to finish research for which they will then, I assume, make a drug which they will then make a lot of money off of, or a research, a publicly funded research, which doesn't have the profit motive. And does anybody make some kind of a distinction?
Dr. Relman, is that a distinction?
I think it's a terribly important distinction.
Why?
But I would be happy to answer that question, but I would just like to elaborate one more point concerning the previous issue. Dr. Oldham now tells us that the treatment, quotes, unquote, the treatment or the experimental treatment that he proposes to give to my patient and charge $30,000 for, he's never given to anybody else before. He doesn't know whether it's going to work or not. I would have very serious doubts in my mind whether I could in good conscience tell my patient to take this treatment when there's no evidence by Dr. Oldham's statement that it's going to work. Then add to that the fact that I know that Dr. Oldham is the officer of an investor-owned company.
Well, why does that matter?
Because their financial interests and their financial future depends on their persuading patients like my Bill Parker to take this unproven treatment of unknown safety and unknown value at a time when they're scared to death, they're desperately seeking for something, and it awakens memories in my mind of snake oil salesmen who used to go around doing this sort of thing with unproven, untested remedies, saying, trust me, it'll work. I know it'll work. Just give me your money. And poor, desperate, sick people would extend themselves to pay for it. Now, I'm not impugning Dr. Oldham's integrity. I'm just saying the situation that he puts me in is very uncomfortable.
Dr. Oldham, is that what you're trying to do?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that's what we're trying to do. I believe there are alternative ways to go about solving problems for you, Bill. I think one possibility is for you to present yourself and your body, if you will, to the National Disease Institute and go on a randomized trial of placebo versus hope. On the other hand, you can also take, if you like, some of these efforts yourself. And you can go to my institute or any other company and try to get a treatment they might have. And that's within your rights and purview.
Dr. DeVita?
I don't believe we should sell unproven methods of treatment, Bill, and I think I've now looked into Dr. Oldham's operation. What he's describing is that these are treatments that have been developed in various experimental programs. They're available elsewhere, and I can find a place for you to get those programs somewhere. It'll be no additional cost to you, and I would recommend that you do that, actually.
Dr. Young, does the fact that this is a profit-making company play a role in evaluating the merits of the therapy Dr. Oldham has created?
No, I don't think you make the cut on whether it's a profit-making company or not. But the critical thing is your estimate of whether or not you're going to get some benefit of this.
My problem is I talk to all these people and they all tell me essentially they don't know.
Bill, the terrible problem that you have here is that that's right where the state of the art is today. I wish that I had a cure. I can't help you in giving you a guarantee.
But he's got something. It'll cost me $35,000, but maybe it'll do some good. Why shouldn't I just go and try it?
He's got something that he thinks may help you. I'd go back to Dr. Koop. He's your family friend. He's taken care of you all these years. Ask him for his unbiased judgment, because he's the one that has no vested interest in the trial.
Dr. Koop?
He's only concerned with you.
Are you affected by the fact that it's so expensive?
No, I don't think, I just don't want to see you disappointed, and I can understand the desperation of people in your situation with a fatal diagnosis, no cure on the horizon that anybody has any faith in, and you get this desperate feeling that you've got to do something. Now, I understand that. But I also think I should protect you a little bit from one further disappointment, because I don't think there's enough credibility in what's going on in Dr. Oldham's laboratory to give you the satisfaction that you're going to do something that might work. I think it's one more disappointment. You can't take many more.
Mr. Kovhana?
If we assume just for a moment that there is as much credibility in what Dr. Oldham is doing, medical credibility, the fact that it's for profit, it seems to me,
shouldn't matter.
Shouldn't matter. Pharmaceutical companies every day are operating at a profit and testing drugs and have brought upon us a tremendous number of miracles. In a medical system in which there's so much doubt, my God, if you talk about AIDS, you want every opportunity you can to try and find the cure for AIDS. And universities, in their own ways, you may not call it profit, but they hire people, they bring in people, they want them to be superstars, they want to get lots of research bucks. That's profit for the university, helps pay their overhead.
Does it make sense to talk as though there's a clear line between ordinary medical treatment and, on the one hand, and experimentation on the other? It seems to me it's always the case when you go to the doctor with a vague pain in your side. The doctor may try on that various techniques and various medicines that have been useful in other contexts, but until he knows for sure what's causing the pain, what is going on is a sort of experimentation.
And in that circumstance, why shouldn't I pay for the experiment?
That's right. It seems to me that all we're talking about is the likelihood that he's right about his guess that this may do you some good. Just as in any medical treatment, all we're talking about is the likelihood that the doctor has guessed right about what's causing the pain in your side. The whole question comes down to, what is the medical basis for his guess?
Dr. Ellman?
I'm afraid the analogy that Justice Scalia drew is not a very good one. Of course, there's a good deal of uncertainty in the practice of medicine, and many things that responsible physicians do in the face of inadequate information will have uncertain consequences. But what the physician does in the face of uncertainty is pretty well established and pretty well agreed on to be the best thing to do under the circumstances. It's clearly advancing the patient's welfare as best you know how, and clearly calculated not to do harm. In this circumstance, what Dr. Oldham is proposing to has never been done before. Whereas if you come to me with a pain in your side of uncertain etiology, I've dealt with that a lot of times before, Justice Scalia. I may not know in a particular case what the pain is due to, but I know how to find out. So I take steps to find out.
Big difference in degree. I agree with that.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
It isn't just a question of uncertainty and profit, because after all, we know there's huge variations on what physicians do when faced with a diagnosis. There can be 7- and 10-fold differences. And you don't say that the doctors who are doing it more frequently are selling snake oil. You say it's medical judgment. The only reason, Bud, the only reason that medical research isn't paid for by the patients is that it's paid for by the government and by research foundations.
Or by the people who stand to profit by it, namely the drug companies.
And the reason there is some sense that either you're giving the benefit to the drug company, or you're giving the benefit to science, and collectively we call this a public good.
Right.
But there's nothing written in stone that says that the individual who wants to pay for it is put in an absolutely unacceptable position with the physician. I agree with Justice Scalia. It's a question, is this going to be good science? You may have doubts about any particular protocol, but the profit motive compared to all sorts of other motives that drive people, that drive scientists and nonprofit institutions who have their eye on the prize.
Just a second. I want to find out from Dr. Oldham. You've been a researcher in the Institute, and you've been a researcher at bioclinics.
Right.
Is there a difference in your approach?
Not really. I think the things we do involve the same kinds of scientists, the same kinds of equipment, the same thought processes. We use protocols. We have institutional review boards. I don't see that there's a difference in the conduct of science. There is a different mechanism for funding the science. Instead of taking a grant from the government, we receive
money from investors.
We raise money from investors, and a partnership between the investor and the patient with the insurance company funding is a little different.
If you don't get Bill Parker or others like him into this program,
yes,
and you don't collect those $35,000 checks,
right,
you're not going to have as easy a time the next time around in raising investor money.
You're absolutely right. And if when I was at the National Disease Institute, if I were to write a protocol and nobody came to be a part of that protocol, I also wouldn't go from associate to a full professor in that circumstance. What would happen was my superior would say, Bob, you are really not a very smart scientist writing such protocols, and no patients came in.
Dr. Marks?
I think that central to the issue on clinical trials is quality control. And I think a great concern has to be that in a situation like a for-private corporation, you are removing from the established quality control mechanisms the overview of the potential efficacy of these clinical trials. That is a basic concern. Now, there are mechanisms to be reassured about it. But Justice Scalia, what I submit...
But does it make any difference in that regard, whether it's profit-making, with investors behind it, or the government behind it?
It might. It doesn't have to, but it might. There are highly ethical pharmaceutical companies that go to great lengths to establish quality control, and they see it as in their best business interest. That's the central issue, I think, here. And the central issue as to whether an open protocol is of value with these drugs is something that has to be examined, and examined, like you said, who do I turn to give me an answer? Nobody knows. One of the reasons we don't know is because there is an inadequate quality control mechanism built into this approach today.
Justice Scalia?
It seems to me the bottom line for Bill, in every case, is simply going to be how much medical reason is there to believe that this procedure, whoever is supplying it, a private company or not, is going to help whatever's wrong with it.
Okay, let's draw a curtain on Bill Parker for the moment and turn to another problem. Dr. DeVita, hope didn't work. You're back in the laboratory, and you've made what you are beginning to think may be the most important breakthrough of your career. A killed virus vaccine against AIDS. You're still at a stage where you're not completely sure. You're working very hard on it because in your own mind, in the privacy of your own mind, you think this may be it. This is what you've worked for all your life. You get a call one day from a colleague at rival university, Frank Smith. He's been working in the same area, probably not making as much progress as you. And he says, you know, Dr. DeVita, I've been working on this. It looked promising. I've run into some roadblocks. I think maybe if we try to work together more, if we share what we've got up to this point, we'll make progress more quickly.
If I think we can gain something by collaborating, I'll collaborate. Gain is both sides.
Sounds from what he's telling you that he's not as far along as you are.
If I thought there was no advantage, I wouldn't. If I thought there was an advantage, I would.
Professor Capron?
I'm bothered by two things. Advantage to whom? You may be on the wrong track, but something that you have might lead him back onto the right track.
Should he share?
He should share.
Dr. Cooper, suppose instead of the Institute and rival university, it's one of the researchers in your company, Life Tech Industries. And he comes to you and says he got a call from his friend Dr. Sung in Tokyo. I'd like to share the information. Any problem?
You bet.
What?
If we're on the verge of a breakthrough and Dr. Sung would like some of his material, I'd want to know from him what he would expect to get back from that, and why would he want to do it. If it was just to give it to Dr. Sung, then I would ask Dr. Sung what arrangement he's willing to make.
You're concerned about who gets the benefit?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Chalmers?
This is a panel on ethics, and we've heard repeatedly, and I think established the fact that bad science is unethical. And good science requires free communication, free, frequent, complete, detailed communication. So to the extent that we are forced by economic circumstances to cut back on that free communication, we cut back on the quality of the science and therefore on the ethics of the effort we're all making. However, I think we have to be realists and recognize that to a certain extent one may have to dip into this pot a little bit to get things done.
Let's go back to our vaccine for a moment. Dr. DeVita shares the information with Dr. Smith from Rival University. Dr. DeVita has made tremendous progress, and he's in the process of writing it up for publication in a professional journal. Dr. Smith has some different ideas, though, Ms. Goodman, and he calls you up and says, I think we're on the verge of an AIDS vaccine. And it's going to come out in the professional journals eventually, but I can give it to you now. Interested in the story?
I'm very interested in hearing the story.
From Dr. Smith?
I'm interested in hearing it from Dr. Smith. Presumably, I know Dr. Smith and he's a reputable.
Well, he's a researcher at Rival University. Suppose he tells you, though, or you find out, that the fact is that most of this work, 90% of it really, has been done by Dr. DeVita. Did you write it?
You mean without speaking to Dr. DeVita?
Do you want to speak to him?
Oh, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Dr. DeVita, we got a call the other day from a colleague of yours, and I imagine a competitor of yours as well. And he says he's on the verge of a breakthrough of the AIDS vaccine, and a lot of his work is connected to your work. Could I come and talk with you about your work?
Yes, I'll be glad. I can talk to her on the phone, but I'll be happy to talk to you in person if you want.
You prepared to lay it out for her?
No. I'm prepared to discuss that we're doing work in that area and collaborating with Dr. Smith at Rival University, and that the results are very preliminary and too preliminary to really go into any detail for
Suppose,
public.
in fact, that you've got it all written up. You finished the article, you submitted it to Dr. Relman at the New England Journal of Medicine. It's going to be published in a
year or two.
About a month. No, he's ready to move it right along.
Sorry, bud.
It's in the final editing stages, and it'll be out in a month or two.
Will
you give her a copy?
No.
Why?
Well, because I think it's better to have this kind of information. Presumably, it's the kind of information that needs to be digested by the medical community. And I prefer to have the paper published in the scientific journal first, rather than to release it and have people misinterpret the information. The public will misinterpret it. And I feel that...
Are you suggesting that I would miswrite this?
No, but I think that the public is not in position to really understand all the nuances, nor will your editor probably give you enough space to cover the material sufficiently, nor will any scientist peer review your article. I never asked Ms. Goodman to give me her copy so I can see it.
So you'd like it to be in the New England Journal rather than in the Boston Globe?
Yes.
Partially because if it's in the New England Journal, it will be in the Boston Globe, and if it's in the Boston Globe, it may queer the deal to the New England Journal.
Let's get to that. Suppose Ms. Goodman writes the story after talking to Dr. DeVita and Dr. Smith, and you wake up one morning, Dr. Ellman, and there it is, all laid out in her column. You're now 3 weeks from publication. What's your reaction?
Well, when Dr. DeVita submitted his manuscript to us a couple of weeks before that, because this was expedited review, he understood. There was an explicit understanding in the form letter that he got that we undertook to review his work and consider it for publication on condition that he withhold disseminating advance information until we had a chance to review it and publish it. Now, there's always an exception to that. If he were reporting something of urgent concern to the public health, where a few days or a few weeks mattered enormously in terms of lives lost, then our policy doesn't apply. But for the vast majority of medical research, that's not true. And he's agreed to do that. So we expect him to live up to that agreement.
He tried. She got the story.
Nothing I can do about that.
What happens to his article?
We publish it. He's lived up to his part of the agreement.
Suppose instead he says, Ms. Goodman came to see me. She didn't tell me how she got this, but she had the gist of it. She asked me a few questions. I wanted to make sure she didn't get it wrong, so I talked to her.
Bad judgment, Vince. I'm not sure I would pull the article. I might.
Why?
Because Dr. DeVita violated an agreement that he made with me voluntarily, which presumably he made because he agrees with me and the vast majority of his colleagues that that is not the best way in the public interest to disseminate, and in the interest of science, to disseminate new scientific information.
Unethical.
And he's violated, or he may have violated that agreement.
Is it unethical for him to?
Yes, I think so.
Disseminate it to the public?
Oh, I don't agree that it's unethical. I think that part of, but denies that I got the story. I beat him.
Are you in any different position than she is?
Of course we are.
Why?
Well, because our job is not to simply spread the bottom line in a few nifty, well-chosen paragraphs in the Boston Globe.
I beg your pardon.
Well chosen, nifty, well chosen, meant to be approval. We're not in the business of doing that. Our job and our responsibility is to review the data very carefully, to have experts in Dr. DeVita's field, recognized experts and statisticians review it, suggest changes.
But it still is much news in the professional community and as important to get into the professional community as it was before her story.
Yeah, but the fact is that medical scientists and physicians who might have to use that information cannot possibly base their judgments and their decisions. They cannot base their advice to patients on the basis of Ms. Goodman's article. They cannot.
Dr. Young, is it ethical to have this most important journal deciding not to publish the results of this important breakthrough because the Boston Globe wrote a column?
May I go back one step to the first point? There is a major ethical argument if it's broken in the lay press before the scientific issues in an agency such as the one that I'm involved in, because we get sometimes thousands of calls that may come in. Is this true? Is this appropriate? And we don't have the evidence. Now, sometimes it might be a breakthrough drug that has a good possibility. On the other side, someone might come and, quote, discredit a drug that's life-saving, and people will be going around without the facts.
Well,
so
all the more reason, then, for him to print it in the New England Journal after the story.
I'm only talking right now about breaking it in the press before the article comes out. I would part company, I think, with Dr. Relman strongly in regards to having the article come out in the journal, even though it's broken by the press. I would take the action in subsequent events, not jerk the article, because if it's a sensationally important event, the American people and the scientific community need to know it early, and it would be unethical, in my opinion, to pull the article.
To pull it. Justice Scalia, I would agree with you.
Justice Scalia?
I would agree with you.
Does this make any sense to you? I mean, would you pull a decision if it leaked to the Boston Globe?
Makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you make your judgments on the basis of what produces the best good in the long run. Now, it may well be that in this particular case, it would be less harmful and do more good to publish it in the journal despite the fact that it's been leaked. But if the consequence of that is to induce leaks in innumerable cases in the future, if that's the only feasible sanction, which is I think what has been said, then in the long range good, which is what you always have to consult, the thing to do is to force people to abide by their contracts by refusing to publish this.
As Alex Capron pointed out during this broadcast, medical scientists do wear two hats, physician and researcher. When those two roles intersect and sometimes collide, an ethical dilemma occurs and human life can hang in the balance. Next week on Ethics in America, politicians, the press, and the ethics of privacy. Try to join us.
This has been a production of Columbia University Seminars on Media and Society in association with WNET, New York. Columbia University Seminars on Media and Society is solely responsible for the content of this program. With additional support from Equicor Equitable HCA Corporation, the Good Listening Employee Benefits Company.
Annenberg Media. For information about this and other Annenberg Media programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org.